Hey YouTube, what's going on? It's Reader1717, and I just finished reading Charles Bukowski's Women. Finished it last night, and I just wanted to share some of my thoughts with you guys about this book. In my haul video, I had mentioned that I actually enjoy Bukowski's prose more so than I do his poems, although I absolutely love his poems. But this is just slightly edges it out for me. So, Henry Chinaski is basically the pen name or alter ego, I guess, of Charles Bukowski. There are 3 books that he's written: Post Office, Ham on Rye, and Women. And though there is probably technically a reading order, I haven't read Ham on Rye, but I decided to just pick up Women and read that because it seemed really interesting. I know Ham on Rye talks more about his childhood, or Henry Chinaski's childhood, and so on and so forth. But this book picks up when Henry Chinaski is in his 50s. And basically the book is about his escapades with women, because now he is at sort of a celebrity status when it comes to his poetry, and he's garnering a lot of attention. He makes his living off of his poetry. This character is somewhat unlikable, in a lot of ways unlikable, but yet sympathetic. There was a quote from the book on page 66, chapter 21, and I think a woman by the name of Nicole made this statement in the book. And she said, "Your writing, it's so raw. It's like a sledgehammer, and yet it has humor and tenderness." And I think that pretty much sums up what I think of Bukowski's writing in general, whether it's his poems or whether it's his prose. This book, to me, felt so sincere and so honest and so real. It resonated with me on so many levels. I really connected with this book. I don't know if my 20-something self would have been able to connect with this book in the same way. I think I would have liked it, but for different reasons. But as I've matured, this book has more meaning to me. In a day and age where we live on filters and everything is, edited and cleaned up for the benefit of others, Henry Chinaski and the women he encounters in this book are just real. They just seem like real people because they're pretty much based on real people. And he doesn't hide the ugliness. He doesn't shy away from vulgarity. He doesn't apologize for any of it. He's just telling a story, and I can appreciate that. There's something refreshing about the realness of this. And this book does have humorous moments in it. And although Chinaski's character doesn't treat women that well, I would have to say that the women also don't treat him that well. There was only one interlude with a female, I think, in this book that I kind of had a bit of a raised eyebrow at, only because he did have sex with her, and she was so intoxicated that she couldn't really consent to it. It's up for debate on whether some would say that that is assault or not. But to me, it did raise an eyebrow. But after even saying that, the women in this book wanted to be with him. They had their own set of problems. They found his work alluring. They found him charming for whatever reasons. And they had their moments with him, whether it was short-term relationships, long-term relationships, or just like one-offs. This book is pretty much sex, drinking, and him talking about going to the races and gambling and betting. Like, you know, he does some poetry readings and stuff like that. But mainly, I mean, sex and getting loaded and taking drugs and getting high is like a huge constant in this book from start to finish. By the end of it, for me, the women's names became sort of a blur because it was a little bit repetitive. If I had to say anything negative about the book, I guess it would be that. But I absolutely love the rawness of this book. You know, there was also like moments of tenderness in this book where when he wasn't fucking these women and getting loaded with them, he would have these moments, especially with the character of Lydia, where she would pop his zits. And, you know, I think to be embraced for your warts and all, so to speak, by another human being, and to have them love you and do something so intimate and so tender with you, and accept you, I think that's pretty amazing. And like I said, in a day of filters and editing where everybody has to look perfect and has to be perfect in front of the camera, it's refreshing to see people that just are just regular people and finding the beauty in those people. I mean, Charles Bukowski wasn't exactly, you know, a Maxim GQ model. This man said himself that he didn't find himself very attractive. Henry Chinaski didn't describe himself as an attractive man, but yet he found himself in bed with these various women who were all different from each other. A lot of them being like 20 years at least younger than him. But yeah, absolutely love this book. Absolutely love this book. One of my favorites, I think. There's just something about Bukowski, and he talks about in this book not wanting to be around people, and I get it. By nature, I am a social person, but people disappoint me on a regular, and I can totally understand him not wanting to be around people. I can understand him saying that being around people distracts him from his writing. I can understand him saying that writing is his first real love and everything else comes second to that, including women, friendships, whatever, family. Maybe not family totally in the sense of his daughter. In real life, I believe he had a good relationship with his daughter, but the character I'm talking about. But I do get it. I can understand that. A person like myself who loves writing and who is working, I'm constantly trying to work on my writing. I do find that I spend sometimes more time doing that than I do even interacting with my spouse, which is kind of sad in some ways, but I don't sometimes notice that I'm even doing it. And I try to make up for it. I do have a pretty big social like network of friends, and I go out, and I'm not a recluse by any stretch. And I do love a lot of things that Henry Chinaski and Charles Bukowski, I think, weren't great fans of, which was being around people. I just find that people are disappointing, and maybe I'm always interested in meeting new people in order to observe life, in order to gain experiences to write about. But as I've gotten older, my patience is like wearing thin, I think, and I just don't have time. So Charles Bukowski as a writer appeals to me because he doesn't have time for bullshit in his life, and I don't have time for bullshit in my life. This book is just an excessive sexual, drug and alcohol infused marathon. It's just that's all that's in this book. But if you look at each of these interludes, if you look at how he feels about Lydia, how they interact together, there is more to the book than just what it is. I think sometimes because of how simply and plainly it's written and how unpretentious it is, I think that's another reason I loved it, because he's not pretentious. He just tells you what he's got to tell you in a very straightforward language. And you don't need to read between any lines, really. There is more to be seen in the relationships. And the character of Chinaski has layers. And like I said, he's not a likable character, but you kind of root for him. I did. I don't blame him, in terms of enjoying himself. I don't know if in my 50s, when I get there, if I want to be, abusing alcohol and drugs to that degree. I'm not really sure if that's the path I would choose personally, but I do get it. I do get the understanding of using substances to numb yourself from pain, make things easier. And the people and friends I've known in my life that have suffered with addiction, it is usually because they are trying to forget and self-medicate. So I do have empathy or sympathy for people who are dealing with addiction. It's, even though they can be assholes, and it's hard to see past that sometimes, there's always a deeper rooted reason for it. Yeah, so this book, if you want to read Bukowski, I wouldn't say that there's a mindset necessarily, but I think if you're going to read women, at least there is a mindset. I think, you have to look past the very obvious sort of chauvinistic or misogynistic characteristics of Henry Chinaski's character, and just look past it and kind of just go with the book, go with the novel, and just let him tell his story. And maybe that's where the gold lies, right? In appreciating the clarity, it not being pretentious, the honesty, and the tenderness and the humor that is interwoven throughout the text. Those are just some of my thoughts on this book. I will be reading Ham on Rye next, and I need to reread Post Office. So anyways, that's my thoughts. If you guys have read this book, I'd love to hear what you guys think of it. If you have any other further insights about Bukowski that you'd want to share with me, I'd love to hear it, because he really is someone that is quickly finding a special place on my bookshelf and as part of my reading life. He's just great. When I feel bitter and a little salty, I know that I can find a friend in Charles Bukowski, and if no one else will understand, he would. And reading his texts and reading his poetry, reading his prose makes me understand that sometimes, people are just assholes, and it's okay not to like them. Not every day can be all smiles and jazz hands. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. And as always, keep reading.